Hi everyone, and thanks for being with me again. We're going to have a chat about Cruela Credlin, the worst person on this planet, who continually advocates for the right wing, who thinks that Dutton is the greatest person on earth, and who can't believe for a moment that the Labor Party can do anything right. That no matter what they do, no matter when they do it, it is seen by her as being catastrophic. And we must hold up that banner that says Dutton will be the next Prime Minister, because he is a winner at every possible opportunity. And this week we saw him have a win. So we must celebrate that whatsoever, even though we have to agree that the Labor Party chose to accept the amendments that they were putting forward in regard to the High Court decision in terms of releasing those people that were on detention, those asylum seekers that were on detention. So what we have then is a whole plethora of people coming out on Sky News telling us what a great decision it was by Dutton and that he actually won that battle. So I think that we need to challenge some of this stuff, and I've been challenging this on a number of my posts up till this point, and we'll continue to do so. However, I am the first to admit that the amendments were appropriate and that it was a good thing that bipartisan decision was made in terms of accepting those amendments so that the people that have been released are properly monitored. I think it's also important to understand that there are many people potentially who could be released, who will be released, who were part of the 93 or so now that have been released, who don't have severe criminal records, who aren't pedophiles, who aren't murderers, who aren't rapists, who aren't all those things that the Liberal Party and the right want to focus on. And also, we must remember that there are many people in the community who commit those crimes, serve their sentence, wind up being released, that are in the community now. So I'm always confused as to why it is we're making such a thing about asylum seekers. And perhaps the reason why we're doing that is because for years, Dutton has done what he can to harm, to discredit, to amplify the racism that sits around being an asylum seeker. And there are many people in this community who tend to agree with him around all of that, that just because you come from another country, because you have a different colour skin, because you have an odd name, because you have a different religion than Christianity, therefore you must be demonised. And that's exactly what Dutton has done. Now, I'm going to play some clips I've got of Credlin's discussion with some people, including Dutton, around all of this, and we'll see what you think about all of this, and I'll just make some interesting little comments along the way to try and clarify some of the stuff that Credlin is talking about.
Thanks to the opposition, these hardened criminals, including murderers, rapists and pedophiles, will at least now have to wear ankle bracelets. But frankly, the only place for them is in detention or preferably out of the country. The government was warned in June, so months ago, that the High Court was likely to reverse its previous judgment and order the release of these criminals.
They were told by the High Court in June that the High Court had changed its mind or had problems. They should have been drafting legislation from them.
Prudent governments look at a win, a loss, what that means. Do we need to draft legislation in anticipation? And there's plenty of examples where the government...
Now, just on that point, something has come out today, or yesterday, I think it might have been, where Claire O'Neill stated that the government were informed by the legal profession, those who were advising them about the possible outcome in relation to this case, was that the High Court would agree with the government. Now, that was not true in the end. So the question remains, what does the government do when they believe that a decision is being made in their favour? Does that mean they assume that it's not? Does it mean they spend all their time and effort creating legislation that will verify their decision or not. So what actually does the government do? Well, in this case, they believe that they didn't actually know what was going to be the outcome. The other thing to remember in this case is that the government are also waiting on the High Court's actual written reasons as to why they've made this decision. Now, that will not be known until next year, I believe. So there's a lack of information that the government possibly, it could be argued, I'm not suggesting that it's true or not, but it could be argued that the government didn't have that information, or enough information at least, to be able to make an appropriate decision. The other problem, of course, that they have is that they didn't know that whatever legislation they put forward would be in accordance with the High Court, or which could be challenged, so that it's taken to the High Court and in turn thrown out. So they're in this kind of quandary. Now, the real question at this particular point in time is, who does one blame? Well, given that both major parties, exception of the Greens and the Teals, but the most major parties have made a decision about what legislation was required. This has since been passed. And if that gets turfed out as being inappropriate by the High Court, then both parties are responsible for that decision. The problem that we've got here is that the government or nobody else is prepared to overrule decisions made by the High Court. That would be a disaster. But not understanding what it is that the High Court has chosen to do and the reasons why they've chosen to do it really is one of the primary problems here. But the Liberal Party saw this as an opportunity to put the knife into Albo, and as a result of that, we've kind of got this mess. Not necessarily entirely of Labor's doing, but certainly has been contributed by Labor's inability, I think, to have been able to work out an alternative at the appropriate time, that is last week. So what this actually means at the end of the day is that the optics around all of this look pretty shitty, and they've decided that it is best to side with the Liberal Party. There's 6 amendments which they've now implemented, and let's see what happens from that point on. So more of my friend, Mr. Dutton.
A win, a loss, what that means. Do we need to draft legislation in anticipation? And there's plenty of examples where the government will come to us, or when we were in government, we went to the then opposition, saying we've got to pass this bill today to clean up what is now a real problem that the court's created. And you do that within the law, obviously, or within the bounds of the Constitution, but that's not what the government's done here.
I like the way, just as a sideline, I like the way Dutton didn't necessarily cite an example. He just said that we've done this. I have no idea as to when they have done that to challenge High Court decisions we're talking about here. They might have done it in order to change some federal court decisions, but not necessarily High Court. So what has he done? Who knows?
Sarah, if I was writing the government's policy, these people would be back in detention because we're talking about some pretty serious criminal.
Now, that's a stupid thing to say because the High Court has ruled that you can't do that. So what is it? So it doesn't highlight the actual policies, the legislation that he would put forward that would send them back. He can't just send them back. That is bullshit, Dutton, which is kind of like most of the shit that you talk about anyway. But this is what he's saying, is that he's the tough guy and that he would just send them back. Sorry, buddy, can't do that.
The first and foremost thought here is for the victims. There was one victim, a pregnant woman who was murdered.
Now, the other thing that Dutton does, which I noticed the other side not doing, is that he highlights the extreme cases over and over again. So he talks about this woman who was burnt, other people that have been raped. He talks about pedophilia. He talks about the real terrible stuff, which it is. Not denying any of that. And I believe that some of those people should not be released either. But that's not what this is about. This is about also all those other people, some of which have not committed a crime, and they themselves find themselves under the same restrictions as do those people that have. And we must keep, I think, that in mind.
With explosives, unbelievable, and a non-citizen. And now it turns out the government's paying welfare to these 84 as well. They're staying in motel accommodation paid for by taxpayers. We had 1 hour.
The other issue I want to raise, oh God. The other issue I want to raise about this too is that who does Dutton think's paying for these people while they're in detention? They're not working. They are sitting around playing cards, listening to the radio, watching television, doing whatever it is you do while you're in detention. But we are also paying for whatever that cost is, which is millions, hundreds of millions of dollars a year to keep these people in detention. So I don't know what the hell he's talking about. And do these people, that's the other question, do these people need to have the right, no matter who they are, particularly those that haven't got a criminal case against them but are still under the same restrictions, what contribution do we think or can expect them to make to our community? Clearly they can make some. So I think we need to be a little bit more open-minded about this policy than what these guys are.
To draft these amendments, and there would have been a lot more that we would have done, but time was not on our side yesterday. But we ended up getting some changes, and I hope that gives us a chance of making the community.
And I always think, well, why didn't you guys preempt this decision either? Why was that just up to the government to do that? Surely you must have been able to get some advice as to what was likely to happen in the High Court and have your amendments ready and raring to go, because you guys could pass legislation, or at least apply to pass legislation that would have put you in a much more powerful position than just waiting for the government to do so and you putting forward your amendments on their bill.
A little bit safer, but while these people are out in the community, it's a disaster.
Almost 6 weeks on from the October 7 atrocities in Israel and the immediate eruption of Gas the Jews hate speech on streets in Australia, the Albanese government still can't decide whether the big problem is rampant anti-Semitism or an all but non-existent Islamophobia. The Prime Minister, currently in the United States, says he's committed to military strength.
Can we make a point there that that actually we're changing tack now, so now we're having a shot at the fact that there's hardly any Islamophobia, but there's always anti-Semitism. I think if you're a woman and you're wearing a hijab and you're in the community, you would be receiving often a lot of racist slurs, anti-Muslim type slurs. So it happens, and I think, Credlin, you're an idiot, because the basic reality is that for her, facts do not matter. And I think it's shameful that she should take this completely one-sided view of this issue, as opposed to realising that this happens across the board. Anti-Semitism is wrong, anti-Muslim is wrong, anti-Islamic behaviour is wrong. So, we need to be looking at this in a much broader context than what is being presented by this strange and bizarre individual.
Still can't decide whether the big problem is rampant anti-Semitism or an all but non-existent Islamophobia.
All but non-existent.
The Minister, currently in the United States, says he's committed to military strength, but is actually starving all the other parts of our armed forces to pay for submarines won't arrive for at least a decade. His union-dictated workplace relations changes are sapping the economy of productivity on which our entire prosperity rests. And Labor's emissions obsession is closing down coal-fired power stations and demonising gas as well, when
So we've got the whole quinella of events here. And we're now talking about, so we've gone from issues around asylum seekers to issues around Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in particular, according to them. And now we're looking at climate change. So you can see how this woman is obsessed with fitting as many things as she can into this kind of one basket full of terrible things that the government's doing and that, in her view, are wrong. And one of the things I think that's really need to be pointed out at the moment is that the Liberal Party is in a mess itself, regardless of what one might think of the Labor Party. For those of you that are watching, of which I believe now there are quite a few, and who keep having a go at me because I'm just so frickin' left wing and so forth, I am. But I do want people to know that I'm prepared to admit that I am, but I like to look at things in a more rational perspective. So I'm going to tell you that there are certain things or certain behaviours of the Labor Party and certain decisions they make that I actually don't agree with. I think they should be more active on climate change than what they are. I don't like the idea that they're allowing coal mines to open up, and they should just ban them altogether. I think they should, but they don't. I don't like the idea of AUKUS and the fact that we're extremely reliable on the United States for our defence. There are many things that I think the Labor Party could be doing far better than what they're doing. My issue primarily is that the opposition, the alternative to this, to all the problems that we have, including inflation and high energy prices and so forth, even though I feel uncomfortable with all of that, I know that if we had the Liberal Party in power, things would be much, much worse than they are. So it's about choosing, in some ways, I think, the lesser of two evils. I'd much prefer Albanese than Dutton. At the moment, that it appears that the Liberal Party are in a bit of distress themselves because there have been conversations about alternatives to Dutton. So the question that I'm asking now is Dutton going to survive the next 18 months or so, or however long it is until the next election? And I suspect that he won't. But who have they got to replace him? Heaven only knows. It was the shadow minister for immigration, heaven forbid. If it's Susan Lee, heaven forbid. So they have no one else. I mean, everybody that they could choose ostensibly is not worse than Dutton, but certainly not better. So what is the likely outcome likely to be? Do not know. But what I am interested in is if you want to subscribe to my channel, please do so. Ring the bell for further notifications. You know what to do. I've had a couple of people make comments about my channel, and I just want to let you know that I'm happy to hear negative comments. I don't give a shit. Make whatever comments you like, fine. They're not going to change my view about anything, but what I do enjoy noting is that the people that do comment mostly are people that feel upset with what I have to say. Personally, I consider that a good thing. If you're feeling upset, I'm pressing a button. And I'll tell you what, that button that I press is not about me. That is about you, and you're responsible for that button. But please keep coming with those comments, negative or positive. Glad to hear whatever they are. I will try and respond to as many of those comments as I can. In the meantime, I just hope that you find a way to at least not necessarily agree with some of the things that I say, but understand that this is an individual who has access to YouTube, that has an access to the internet, I guess, and that you all have the same access. Every one of you could be doing exactly what I'm doing. And I'm not doing it because I need to increase my numbers and subscriptions. I just think that's nice when I do. I'm not in it for making money. I'm in this because I actually enjoy doing it. I have a lot of fun talking to my camera and talking to you and getting some response. So that's why I do what I do. Now, in the meantime, I just want to think that you might take care of yourself, look after yourself, and more importantly, it's